and it was nothing short of an enlightening experience. The Probation Oversight Commission Executive Director Wendy Julian will briefly share the plan for today and some ground rules for participants, and then we will proceed with updates from Dr. Sarah Gongora, Project Director for the Probation Oversight Commission, and we'll conclude with comments and questions from commissioners and the public. So Wendy, please explain how people can participate in today's virtual town hall meeting.
Thank you, Chair Kakani. And that is, in fact, the whole reason we're doing this is for the public and anyone who wants to participate to listen to our report and to share your thoughts and ask your questions about it. As I said, we're broadcasting live on our YouTube page, but not engaging with users there. And you can watch this video later. We'll also be uploading issues to our social media accounts. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Threads at LA County POC. And we give all our information about when our meetings are, and so you can invite others to attend. Today is not a Brown Act meeting. That's why we're able to do it virtually. We do not have a quorum of commissioners here, and we won't be taking any actions, and we're not in our official role. But we do encourage your participation, as we do always, and we'll leave plenty of time for public comment. If you don't want to comment live, we'd also love to hear your comments in writing. You can send those to us and we can include them as public comments, or you can also send them to us and we will not include them if that's the way that you want it to be, that we can keep them anonymous. You can send it to info@poc.lacounty.gov. After we hear from Dr. Gongora, we're going to open the floor to the commissioners who are here tonight, and they're going to talk about their experience and then allow for extensive time for members of the public to ask their questions and make their comments. We'll probably limit the time, although it's going to depend a little bit on how many people are here. We don't have to be so strict as usual. And also, if you have questions for the panelists, they can answer your questions. It'll just be a lot more informal than our regular meetings. So if you want to provide public comment when we get to that point, you can click on the little hand icon that's sort of in the middle on the bottom of your screen. Just click on it and it'll put you in the list. And if you're calling in, then you just press *3 and it raises your hand for us. We will unmute you, but you also have to unmute yourself before you start to speak. That's what we're doing today. So, buenas tardes, bienvenidos. Ya se ha iniciado la conferencia por Webex y le damos una cordial bienvenida a nuestra junta acerca de nuestras inspecciones. Si quiere hacer un comentario cuando llegamos a ese punto de la reunión, haga clic en la imagen de la mano y le llamamos por su nombre. Si está escuchando la conferencia por teléfono y quiere hacer una pregunta o comentario, presione el *3 y le avisamos cuando sea su turno. Tendrá más tiempo porque podemos ayudarle con traducción o usted puede proveer su propio traductor. We're asking you to follow the following communication guidelines during today's meeting. We'd love for you to introduce yourself with your name and share your thoughts and be respectful of time so as many people can speak as possible. And just honor equity and participation with each other as we practice grace and openness. So I would like to introduce my colleague, Dr. Sarah Gongora, who is going to give the presentation, and also really the whole team, including the team, as Millie mentioned, of commissioners who are not here today and of the POC staff. The inspections, in my opinion, are the most vital role that the Probation Oversight Commission plays. And it's also a ton of work. Each inspection takes a full day to conduct, and then many, many hours of work by the commissioners to draft their notes, and Sarah and Jennifer Ochoa Garcia to put together the report. And then our team works to create the communications, including Ismail and Belinda, who really make it look pretty and make it in bite-sized pieces so that people can read it. It's a team effort. It's something that I take really seriously, and I'm very thankful to the commissioners for being willing to do that, because this is our job, but they all have jobs besides this, and they take a full day, in some cases, as you heard, many days during the year to do it, and it's really extraordinary. So I appreciate their work, and it's challenging to do, and thank you for doing that. So with that, I will turn it over to Sarah. We are very lucky to have Dr. Sarah Gongora on our team. Sarah has a background in psychology and has worked for the Department of Mental Health for the county, as well as for community-based organizations. She has really an excellent perspective on probation reform and justice reform in general. And I'm very thankful for the approach that she took on the inspections this year and looking forward to her comments. So take it away, Sarah.
Thank you, Wendy. That was a very nice introduction. Thank you, everybody, for joining us to review the findings of our 2023 facility inspections. Um, there should be a PowerPoint being presented right now. Can anybody see that? Here we go. Okay. Uh, okay. Well, as we're waiting to get started, I want to also give a big thank you to all of our POC commissioners and to everyone that helped facilitate these inspections and participated in our interviews, including probation department staff, co-located county partners, including LACO, Juvenile Court Health Services, and the Department of Mental Health, our community-based providers, and of course, the young people who were willing to share their lived experiences with us to really bring this report to life. So there's a QR code just to make it really easy if anybody wants to have the report. Otherwise, you can find it also on the POC website. Okay, great. So as Wendy was saying, the annual inspections of all probation facilities is a very key responsibility of the Probation Oversight Commission. We do this every year. We've done this every year since our inception. So this is our third annual report. Every one of these inspections is set up well in advance with probation leadership, and Probation Oversight Commission staff and multiple commissioners will typically spend a full 9 to 5 day at each facility observing the environment, observing interactions between staff and youth. We also check out any programming or services available that day, including education and school. We interview young people and professionals on site, and all of that data results in the findings of this report. So for those of you that are going to brave the 78, oh, can you go back the slide? Thank you. So for those of you that are going to like brave the report, you're also going to notice statistical data in there about important information like population or high school students or number of graduates, things like that. That data comes directly from county departments. We're not hand counting that during the day. So I just want to emphasize that while each inspection is a snapshot of that day, through the information gathered, we're able to put this report together to paint a picture and provide the public with a glimpse of what it's actually like to live or work within one of these facilities. We use these inspections findings to provide feedback to the department about what's working or what's not working to encourage better conditions for everyone involved. So all of these reports were also provided to probation for feedback and any corrections prior to publication and of course prior to this presentation. Okay, now we can go to the next slide. Thank you. Okay, so this list is this is actually the list of the inspections we did this year. There were 10 inspections at 9 different facilities. 2023 was a year of remarkable change for many of probation's facilities as a result of findings of unsuitability at Central Juvenile Hall and Barry J that were made by the Board of State and Community Corrections, also known as the BSCC. So as a result of those findings, Central Juvenile Hall transitioned into Central Medical Hub. Barry J. Nydorf became a dedicated secure youth track facility, also known as SYTF. And Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall was reopened to house all of the predisposition youth moved out of those other 2 facilities. So you'll see that we did an inspection of Los Padrinos in preparation for its opening. We did that in June. And then we came back again in October to do the full inspection once all youth were moved in and giving school and programming a chance to be up and running. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Great. So I want to jump straight into the findings, first by highlighting some changes that we observed from the 2022 inspections to what we found in 2023. And I'm really happy to report that in this case, we saw some changes that were really obviously improvements. So in 2022, there were a lot of concerns about contraband, like in the form of either illicit substances or drugs and weapons. And that was a major concern at most facilities. This year, we observed more searches happening. We learned that fewer contraband items were being found overall. We saw perimeter searches happening. And we also saw a pretty major change mid-inspection cycle, with security at the entrances of the facilities doing really consistent searches on everyone coming in. Cell phone bans and the clear bag policies were enforced. And it was very clear that probation did a lot to make those security procedures as consistent as possible across facilities. So, a lot of last year's report focused on issues in the physical environment. And this year, we saw a lot of practical fixes. We saw a lot of construction projects happening, in terms of like installing AC and heating systems. We saw roofs being fixed. We saw a lot of window fixing. All of the spaces that we saw were clean. And even when some of the buildings were old, they were still tidy. And that also extends to Barry J, where in addition to the improvements in the space, there was also an overall positive shift in the tone of the facility. Interactions between leadership and youth and staff were observed to be very respectful, with obvious signs of like established strong rapport between all of those people. And it's not to say that there aren't any challenges at Barry J, but this intentional shifting really tells us that probation has the ability to turn struggling facilities around, and that they're doing that by driving and modeling a culture of respectful engagement in their work with young people. And that's what was reported, and that's what was observed there. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. So there were also findings from 2022 that remained unresolved, in 2023. There is a clear and ongoing need for the department leadership to clarify and unify expected practices across facilities. And one way to go about that, of course, could be to move forward with implementation of the LA model, which at the facilities that have implemented or even just embraced those principles, youth and staff alike clearly reaped the benefit of that environment. We heard from interviews and we observed interactions with probation staff and youth that were trauma responsive. Youth told us that they felt respected and even cared for, and staff at those facilities reported good morale and low callouts. And so, for those of you interested in learning more about the specifics of what that looked like, feel free to look at our reports about Campus Kilpatrick or Camp Rocky. On the other hand, we also received really concerning reports that came from youth and staff alike about antagonistic behaviors of some staff that at times led to escalated tensions in units, fights, and even uses of force. Um, there is really a responsibility that lies beyond just individual staff. That also, I mean, it lies with the leadership of the probation department to figure out a way to move beyond piloting and to make a full commitment to implement a model that staff and youth and county partners are telling and showing us is working. Another repeated finding is that at most facilities, youth and all the professionals reported a need for more programs and services to be offered, especially opportunities for vocational training. So young people, again, year over year, they reported wanting exposure to trades that could lead to job options, especially those young people dispositioned to the SYTF and those anticipating that they may go to SYTF, right? So many of those youth are over the age of 18, and they anticipate being released over the age of 18. So they talked a lot about seeing their ability to earn money directly related to their ability to stay out of trouble in the future. And, in terms of partnership, I think we're all familiar with the African proverb that it takes a village to raise a child. And the work that probation has to house and provide safety to young people, it's just not a task that can be accomplished alone, right? We learned that facilities that had better partnerships had happier people. We heard that probation really wanted to see more DMH partnership, presence, participation in de escalation efforts, and that staff of many departments told us that they wanted trainings together. They wanted to get on the same page. They wanted to know each other's roles for clarity, but also for emergency planning, which it seems really critical for the department to address. Let's go to the next slide. So the following three findings were fairly unique to 2023. In our inspection of the Central Medical Hub and Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall, there were multiple reports by professionals and youth, and even in the grievances reviewed, that youth were not being provided appropriate access to medical care. Lots of reports that they were not being transported to Central for their appointments, including needed x-rays, reportedly due to staffing, which in part, begs the question of why more youth are detained than can be appropriately cared for, but it also renews the call to completely close Central and move all medical services to Los Padrinos ASAP. The POC has previously voted to close Central and will continue to stand by that recommendation until we learn that it has happened. During this year's inspection, substance abuse disorder services and available interventions came into focus, and we saw very wide variations on what was available by facility, again, largely depending on the attitudes and partnerships at each site rather than a coordinated department-wide response. So while the department has done very well to increase those efforts to stop the flow of substances, there is still a ways to go to create a culture that values treatment, right? So looking for markers like ensuring everyone is carrying Narcan, or that substance abuse and harm reduction services are actually scheduled and offered to all youth, and that the environment is conducive to treatment, right? Like allowing providers to have the adequate space they need, or not having them, competing for youth attention in a day room with multiple TVs going, right? So I do have a little bit of good news on this, that I just yesterday received the January programs and services calendars for Barry J. And it looks like there has been an increase in substance abuse programming there. And that's great news. I couldn't finish the report without talking a little bit about OC spray, or oleoresin capsicum spray, also known as pepper spray. The department has been directed twice by the Board of Supervisors to phase out the use of OC at all facilities, but the spray remains available at Barry J and was reintroduced at Los Padrinos shortly after its spray-free reopening. But I think I have to make a distinction between the facilities. So at Barry J, where we are seeing a culture change and a different way of working with young people, we learned during the inspection that there's been a near natural elimination of the use of spray. People just aren't using it. But at Los Padrinos, it was reported that the use of OC has persisted in all units. It's still being used upon girls, youth with diagnosed developmental disabilities, and young people with documented histories of child abuse. So at the time of the inspection, there were no reported phase-out plans at either facility, although they were done in August and October respectively. And it was last reported by the department that a new phase-out plan would be ready at the end of November 2023. So we are still looking forward to receiving that plan. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So I know I have just shared a lot of information here. So I want to pass it to Chair Kakani to facilitate comments from our commissioners that are here with us, who did participate in many of these inspections, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for all of that, Sarah. It's a lot, even just to synthesize. I think what all of us saw, even in those 78 pages, feels like it doesn't do justice to what many of us had to bear witness to. I've been thinking a lot about the inspection process, its purpose, and its value. And while there is the Board of State and Community Corrections that kind of does, the checklist, minimum standards, I think the added value of the Probation Oversight Commission's inspections process is really kind of creating something that is accessible to advocates, partners, folks who are invested in the well-being of young people. And it paints a picture, I think, that is otherwise sometimes hard to see. These facilities are closed, and I think really the only folks who have a true understanding of what happens inside are the young people, the folks who work there as probation officers, as mental health practitioners, the folks who are providing programming. And I think it is really incumbent upon us to ensure that everybody who cares about these young people has an understanding of what's happening inside. And you spoke about culture, Sarah, and something that you talked about concern around there, not really being like a culture that values treatment necessarily because of kind of how we're caring for our young people. But I think there's also this need for a culture that values healing and the humanity of our young people, because it oftentimes feels like it is across the spectrum, where you can walk in one facility and you can sense that there's a real connection between young people and the probation officers who are charged with kind of overseeing them. And you get to see young people like laugh and just be young people. And then on the opposite side, or on the opposite end of that spectrum, is seeing young people who is it like the space is just like devoid of humanity. And it's there's like a sense of like urgency that we're not tapping into, and we are just like wasting the capacity and the capability of these young people because they're not being given access to anything really that resembles healing and hope. But I wanted to give some space and opportunity for the commissioners to share kind of what their experience in this process has been, and if there's something in particular that you all wanted to share about having done these inspections. So I will start with Commissioner Terry, who's to my right, if there's anything you wanted to share.
Hi, can everyone hear me okay? Okay. Looking down because I have some notes. I think I very much appreciated being a part of the process because I do recognize the importance of actually being in the spaces and coming to the meetings and, speaking with probation department and offering opinions and hearing public comment is one thing, but then actually being in the space and in the facilities is a whole different experience. And I think speaking for myself, anytime I go, I'm very conscious that those could be my family members, that it could be me in there. So I do feel a connection. And you, Sarah, bringing up the proverb, it's very true. It is my village. So I don't take it lightly that we have the opportunity to be in that space. So, I think that for a couple of the facilities that I visited, I do have to say that, a question I'm always asking myself is like, who would these youth be if, right? So who would the young people be if they had an opportunity to rebound from making a mistake? Or who would they be if they had just gotten the right resources at critical times in their life? Or if their families or their communities had gotten the right resources? And so I really try to keep that in mind because, for one, these young people are always labeled, but also young people who make a mistake and live in more affluent communities, they're always seen beyond the label. So they're not seen as their mistake. And so I think that is what struck me in the interviews that I was able to conduct with some of the young people, is that, you see artists, you see athletes, you see dreamers, you see emerging scholars, like, you see these storytellers. And so I think that was very, it's just, I don't want to say encouraging because I know that that's who those young people are, but there was something very beautiful and special about that. And I also would have to say that staff, in some instances, I also saw and spoke with staff who were, I think, kind of what you're speaking to, where there is that you sense that they are trying to make that connection, and they do see themselves as caregivers, and they do see themselves as like really taking pride in their work. And I think that really stood out to me in some of the facilities. People who were really proud about the educational program, or who were proud about the young people who had gotten some, college credits, or who had gone on to college. And so I think that was nice too, because sometimes we don't get to talk about that in our meetings, about the positive steps that some of the facilities are taking. I do think that then there are those moments of contradictions where then what you're seeing from staff and what they're reporting isn't matching up with what the youth are experiencing or what they're sharing. And so I think that's where there's that room for growth. the older youth really not having though any kind of like concrete opportunities to kind of set themselves up for when they leave. Obviously not across the board, but in some instances I think is disheartening, especially if you're seeing the population get older, then it's like the services have to change. And then, you know, sometimes in one facility you would have youth who would say staff don't care, and then another who would say, no, I feel really individually supported. And so that always makes me think of where is it okay to have blanket practices and services and programs, and then where do we need to tailor things to match, you know, where a young person is at. And so yeah, I think I'll stop there.
Thanks for sharing that, Commissioner Terry. I will pass it to you, Commissioner Canales.
Hi, thank you so much. Yes, I agree with everything that's been said so far, but you know, I just really appreciate being able to take part in these inspections. For instance, during the heat, when we were getting called from family members during our meetings about how they were having to wait outside, and then going in person and seeing that they did put tents up and they did put water coolers up, and being able to go around to the different yards and see that these things were available to try to, you know, keep people out of the heat somewhat sheltered. One of the parts that I find most rewarding is talking to the young people. And one thing that I realized while at Barry J, you know, of course we're hearing, you know, they're bored, they want more programming. And while I feel, and I put this in my inspection notes, while I feel that Credible Messengers is a very successful program and a much needed program, we also have to keep in mind that it might not be for all the youth, and that doesn't make them bad youth. And we have to keep in mind that we would be doing a disservice if we did not find something. There was some youth in particular that were actually education ambassadors, and they showed all their work. They had their presentations, they created PowerPoints, and you could see the pride beaming in them, but yet they were referred to as somewhat bad youth. They were mischievous, they caused disruptions. And I looked at that and I thought, but here where they feel they're being productive, that they're excelling, that you could see it. And being able to talk through that with staff right there, you know, to where like, okay, there's a shift, you know, and seeing these things, seeing that they are productive and that we are making a difference in these inspections, and that we are taking the bigger picture into consideration. And you know, what I saw at Camp Rocky when I was there, for me, you know, the basketball games and the energy, and because the kids are moving, the kids are, you know, they're doing something with themselves, they're challenging each other, they're challenging the staff, you know, that they're having these competitions, and seeing that, I think, was really for me very rewarding. And another thing that I saw in the staff is how important they think it is that there's youth that are incarcerated that are parents right now. They have a child out here, or they have a child on the way. And how do we begin to look at that and have family unification programs so that they continue to parent, or to learn how to parent? I don't think anybody ever really learns how to parent. That's something that goes the rest of your life, but to continue to have tools and provide tools. And so I was very impressed with that also. And of course, you know, there will always be those on either side that cause disruptions and everything. But I felt that this year, for me, I saw a lot more productivity, a lot more effort. And from the youth, other than saying, you know, we're bored, we want to do something. This is, you know, going in the units, and they were all very open to talk. From my experience, I didn't come across any youth that did not want to talk. So that was a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Canales. Commissioner Garcia-Leyes?
Thanks. So the main question I asked myself about these facilities is, do I feel that I and my neighbors and my community is safer because we send young people to these places? And that is their mission. And generally, I feel there's, on one hand, Los Padrinos, where the answer is no. I actually feel significantly less safe being around anybody who's been incarcerated there recently. And then there's every other facility. where I think there is a lot where there is a possibility of healing, and it does happen quite frequently. Um, so I think, for example, I was asked to talk a little bit about Camp Rocky. Um, I was really impressed. I felt like all the young people who were there are going to leave there a better person than when they arrived. And I also was really uh, the most memorable part of that visit was talking to several of the staff who felt like they understand the kids, that they know how things have gone wrong in other facilities, and they know that that probation staff, when they're given an environment uh, that's proper, can really, can turn things around. And I believe them. Um, so it was, it's heartening to see that. Now, I still am frustrated by the what I think is the quality of education at almost every facility I've been to. I think there's plenty of room for improvement. I would love to be able to say, kind of as the LA model set out to be, that our camps are national models, or at least leaders in California for creating rehabilitatory spaces for young people. Um, so we're not there, but we're at least sort of creating things that are making LA a better place and not a worse place in those areas. But then I got to say, every visit I've had at Los Padrinos makes me think that the place is dangerous for staff and youth, unacceptably violent, traumatizing. Um, and, every youth I talk to at a camp who talks about their experience at Los Padrinos all say the same thing, like, just, oh my God, I'm so glad I'm not there. That was, some of the worst weeks or months of my life. Um, so that just needs to be said over and over and over again until it's not true.
Thank you. Wendy, I don't know if at this point we
I think
turn it over to.
I'm processing those brilliant comments. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I will say before Dolores says something, that Sean just mentioned is something that's really important to bring up, which is Sarah said at the beginning, this is the report on the official inspections. So the 10 sort of full day visits. But these commissioners and the commissioners not here today have made many visits to all of the different facilities, doing unofficial inspections or unannounced inspections, sometimes to see something in particular and sometimes just to check in. So as Sean mentioned, many of them have been in particular at Los Padrinos recently to have more updated experiences, although these reports reflect the snapshot of that day. Dolores, want to speak before we go to public comment?
Yeah, I just want to say really quick that another thing, being able to go in even when we're not doing the inspections, and then going in with the inspections and talking to the youth and everything too. And I've had the opportunity to meet several out here that come home and they're getting involved in community events. And I just recently, during Christmas, one gentleman that was at Camp Rocky was security at a community event where my husband was Santa Claus. And I mean, I took a picture and I'll send it to our team. But I mean, when you see stuff like that, I think it's very rewarding. And so, and he came out of Camp Rocky, and he actually, I'm going to invite him to one of our meetings because he had some very interesting things to say that were positive.
Thanks, Commissioner Klaus. I just wanted there was something that Commissioner Garcia Lays said that kind of that reminded me of something. And while, in theory, some facilities are better than others in terms of culture, like perhaps like the way young people feel about themselves, the number of young people that I spoke to who had previously spent time, not just in our halls, but also our camps, leads me to believe that there is still far too much work to be done. and that we are not giving young people a fair shake at success, given that we have so many young people kind of repeating time, disposition, sentences, whatever you want to call it, in these facilities. And so I think there just needs to be kind of some thought given to like how we care for and treat young folks, and what the limits are when we incarcerate young people. So yeah, I don't know if we want to move to public comment at this point.
Yeah, I think given how many people are here, I don't think we need to put the timer up. I think we'll just let folks raise your hands, and we welcome you to say your piece and ask questions if you wish. So if anyone would like to make public comment, please raise your hand using the little raise your hand icon at the bottom of the screen. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're on your phone, dial *3 and that will raise your hand for us. Thank you, Sabra, for being the first to raise your hand. And we're going to unmute you and then click unmute yourself and let us know what you think. You're good to go.
Thank you. Happy New Year, everybody. Thank you. I'm Sabra Williams. I'm co-founder of Creative Acts, a social justice arts organization. We have been working since 2018 across the LA County juvenile system, and we also work with CDCR with a civic engagement arts program that has proven very popular and very successful. 100% of our kids voted in the last presidential election. So basically what I want to say, there's a few things I wanted to say. Thank you for this report. And also, I was very pleased to hear that it's not always the planned visit, because we often have a different experience working inside than you appear to be having. Not in all of the places, but certainly in some of them. I would really like to hear about Paige and Aflabar, what your experiences were there, because that has been, our classes there have been the hardest right now, out of all of the different facilities that we're in. So that's one thing. I just want to give credit to the people with lived experience. Majority of our teaching artists have lived experience of those places, and also the credible messengers, who I know have done a lot of work at BJN. There is a really big problem with people bringing programs in. So we're always hearing there's not enough programs, and we could bring our program in many more times to many more places if we had the funding, which I know that the county's still sitting on $100 million of funding. And the other issue is clearances. So there are the very big organizations that seem to be able to get their clearances done pretty easily and quickly. Ours literally can take weeks to months to get the clearances done. And then they permanently unclear people, or take people off the list, and there's no avenue for appeal. So that has happened a few times for no good reason. It seemed to happen much more after CBOs were accused of bringing in drugs, when we know it was not the CBOs bringing in the drugs. And so then it seemed like anybody with a drug record, however long ago, who are our teaching artists, were then denied permanently. So I feel like if it's easy enough for the large organizations to get clearances and keep their clearances, something's going on if small organizations are having a problem with that. And maybe we can all do our clearances together. And then I would just say, lastly, punishment. We hear a lot from staff. We're not allowed to punish the kids. We can't use pepper spray. We can't lock them up. What are we supposed to do? These kids are, riding roughshod over everybody. People don't know they're being manipulated by them. The powers that be don't let us discipline them at all. So I feel, and I know we feel at Creative Acts, that the probation officers, in order to stop their quiet quitting and this kind of wanting to punish, need to be retrained. And it would be great if they were retrained by CBOs. as we have done in the past. So I just want to say that, and I would love to hear your views on Paige and Aflabar and also those things. Thank you so much for all the work you're doing.
Thanks, Sabra. I appreciate it. Thanks for coming. I think if you look at the report, you'll find there are some concerning findings at Page in particular. There were some challenges during that inspection and across the facilities. I think, as Sarah noted, there are some specific things. Sarah, I don't want to put you on the spot, but is there anything you want to bring up about what the report says about Page? Or Aflerbaugh, but it's Page in my recollection where there were more issues that came up.
I'm trying to recall off the top of my head. I think the day that we did the inspection, there wasn't a ton of programming happening. I think if I remember, there was maybe one CBO that had come in, and there were also some additional issues about educational services that day and graduates that were maybe just sitting around in the dorm. I think Diane may have been with me for some of that, Commissioner Terry, and maybe Commissioner Kakani also. Both of them were there at that inspection. But yes, I do recall seeing youth that were just kind of sitting around in the dorm at times where you would expect that they'd have something to do during the other time where youth were at school.
Commissioner Terry, I don't know if you wanted to add something if you recall that inspection.
Yeah, I was trying to remember. I'm not recalling anything more specific in this moment. Do you have anything that you would offer?
So I think on that day, most of my time was spent at Camp Page. If I recall correctly, I think the first part of your day may have been at Aflerbaugh, and then you came over to Page, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah.
And I mean, to be quite honest, I remember seeing staff who were wildly, I don't know if like frustrated or like disinterested or like resigned almost, kind of standing both outside and inside the classrooms. I recall I believe it was LACO staff who had their phone and whose charger went missing. And so the response to that was staff coming during the school day or at the start of that like school session and searching all of the young people to determine if any of them had taken her phone charger. And the way it had left young people so incredibly dysregulated and angry, and it was never addressed by anyone. And what it resulted in was the entire afternoon session of school being shot. Like no one was interested in doing anything. No one was capable of doing anything. And there was really no discussion again around what had just happened, how it made those young people feel. No one called on DMH. I don't know, just I can't imagine. I get that we normalize these types of things in these facilities. And we never really kind of talk about the harm and like the conditioning and the dysregulation that it causes. And maybe that happens the next day, maybe it happened later in the day. But at least while I was there and the remainder of the afternoon session, there was no one who addressed it. And it just felt like it was justified. It was what we had to do. And now we're going to keep it moving. And that was the end of that. Similar to what Dr. Gongora shared, there was absolutely nothing happening for young people who are graduates, all of who mentioned that they just kind of sat around all day. And I remember chatting with young folks at the end of that day. It was kind of after school, after lunch, and that their, general reaction was, anytime we misstep, we're threatened with a write-up. And so we can't speak up for ourselves. We can't speak out. We can't kind of question because when we do, we get write-ups. And when we get write-ups, there are consequences either in court, in calling our family members, in like accessing the things. that keep young people feeling connected, grounded, and experiencing joy. And I remember when we visited Camp Rocky, if I recall correctly, there were two young people from Camp Page. Maybe it was actually just one young person who was at Camp Page, who was in not solitary. I'm sorry. Remind me what it's called.
The
Hope
Hope
Sorry.
Center.
The
Yeah,
Hope Center.
when I was there were two from Page, I think, in the Hope.
You're
Yeah.
right, actually. It was two. And I've never seen anything more tragic in my life, to be quite honest. The second person had just come, I want to say like a week or so before, but the other young person had been there by himself for like weeks. And when asked what he did with his time, he's like, well, sometimes staff will come with me and we'll lift weights, but otherwise I just sit around all day and literally just like stare at a screen with nobody to talk to, nobody to engage with. I don't, I can only imagine what that does to someone's like well-being. And I don't know, like healing. So those were, I mean, those were my memories. I don't even know if that answered your question, Sabra, but that was my recollection of um, Camp Page. And just, it felt like there was a lot of work that needed to be done to more meaningfully like care for these young people.
Chair Connie, I don't actually see any other echo. I don't see any other hands raised. Is there anyone else who'd like to give comments today? Janae, did we receive any written comments today? Janae, I'm actually not able to. Oh, here we go. Maureen Pacheco. Maureen, we're going to unmute you. Sorry, there we go. Okay, go ahead, Maureen.
Thanks, you guys. This is a great report to hear back. And I'm just wondering if there was any judiciary on here, because one of the things that's frustrating is that there's been a real surge in arrests and prosecution of kids from LP who have gotten into incidents that to me are directly related to the carceral situation where they're not being given adequate programming and the frustration about not giving adequate healthcare or education. And yet, I just don't know that the people who really need to know about this are being made aware of it. So I would request that perhaps you can send the report that's been prepared out to not just the presiding judges, but to each and every one of the juvenile court bench, because I do think that they need to be made aware of this when they're looking at reports of how kids are doing. And it's very isolated. They only get sort of this negative picture without really knowing what's going on. So thanks for what you guys are doing.
That's a great idea, Maureen, and we will share the report. Thank you. Anybody else want to comment? Yes, Major Bunton. We'll unmute you and then you can unmute yourself. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Major Bunton, and I am the Director of Programming for Creative Acts. Sarah Williams spoke earlier. I have lived experience. I've been through the process of being in juvenile hall. Just my perspective, I think that, it's hard to get our kids to, to build trust, right? It's hard to build trust with our youth today, especially the communities that they come from. There's just a lot of conflicting conversations in their communities, the households that they come from. It's just very difficult for them. And so I find it that when they do go to juvenile hall and they start to think about they want to change, where do we come in at where we start to assist them with community-based organizations that are preparing them for this transition? Because I really believe like those first 30, 45 days are so crucial for them, because if they come home and they catch up with some of their old friends, it's just a cycle. It repeats itself again. So how do we set these community-based organizations that are really doing the work, that can really assist them in ways that help them see themselves better than how they came in? So how do we prepare for partnerships with community-based organizations, because they're out here now. They're all through LA County now. There's all these grants that they're receiving, and they just need participants to come through and be a part of their program. And so, how can we make that chain connection to start to change the cycle of what's happening? And that would be my only concern, because I really feel like I noticed that through Creative Acts, when I offer them programs and they call, those was the ones that really stuck with the program. I have 4 kids right now who stuck with the program, who are working, who are doing good, but I needed to get a hold of them right away. And I took that initiative. And I think that's what it takes. We have to take the initiative to make these connections in order to stop the cycle that is happening. And when their friends see this, they can start to say, wow, you know what? This is one of my friends I used to be with. He's changed his life. Maybe they want to think about changing their lives as well. So that's just my perspective. And I do have a community-based organization. That's something you guys want to talk about in the future. I'm all for it. But again, thank you for your work and everything that you guys have tried to, stabilize. Because I know it's difficult. It's not this the work you guys are doing is very difficult, and I don't want you to think that we're missing that at all. So I just wanted to put that out there, just let you guys know that it takes a team, it takes a village, and this is what we're here for. So thank you.
Thanks so much for that, Major. And I'm sorry, Commissioners, I didn't ask you if you wanted to respond to Maureen's comments or if you want to respond at all to what Major just shared. Okay, Joseph, you're up next. Joseph, you may need to click unmute. There you go.
In the front, I've heard different stories of how families feel humiliated going through to visit their kids, having to strip down to their bare feet, taking off their socks. I've had some families feel like they're gonna ask them to squat and cough, um, just to visit their kids. And I get it. I mean, like security, but I just I think that's uncalled for. Especially when there's other people that just walk in there, and I'm one of those other people. Sometimes I've been able to walk through, and I've gotten things past that I forgot to take out in my car. And I took a metal thing in accidentally once, and it just slid through. So it's real easy to get stuff in. But when families are going just to visit their loved ones and feel humiliated just for going, it's just something that came up for me when I heard the security ramped up. I don't think that's a solution, because visitors in prison don't even have to take their shoes off. They have to dress appropriately, but they don't have to take their shoes off visiting their loved ones in prison. So I don't know why visitors in juvenile halls are treated that way. That's all I got.
Thank you very much for that, Joseph. There are a number of commissioners who've been very interested in this topic, including Commissioner Canales, and also Commissioner Lewis, who's not with us today, has had a lot of concerns and questions about that. Go ahead, Commissioner Kokani. Chair Kokani.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joseph, for sharing that, because it reminded me, at LP, I had left my thing, I think I was walking in with the water bottle, and I was told that I had to put that back in my car. Fine, put it back in my car. And when I saw staff walk in, instead of like putting all of their belongings on the whatever that conveyor belt thing is, they would just like hold up their stuff. So it's like, oh look, I'm gonna beep because I'm holding my phone or because I'm holding whatever else is in my hand, or my keys, and then they would walk through, and they would get to go through that. So, while maybe there have been some improvements and kind of more consistency, I think to Joseph's point, right? Like we do kind of give passes to certain folks, and not to others. And I think it is perhaps really important for us to think about kind of the impact that all of that has on folks who are coming through, to visit their family, to make those connections, the way we treat them, and what that does to folks, and what that does, to people. So I think there's, to your point, perhaps improvements have been made, but we know that, unfortunately, terrible things are still continuing to happen, where young people are still overdosing, and young people are still having to have Narcan be administered. And I just think it's important to acknowledge that we are far from ensuring that every young person is safe. And sometimes the steps that we take to kind of reach that might not be the right ones. And I think, in talking about like the access to like DMH and like substance use programming, and getting some more information around that also feels really important, because I think, especially at LP, when I think young people are, again, the most dysregulated, the most concerned, and like the most like chaotic environment, at least when we were there in, what was it, October. Mental health treatment was not happening on a regular basis, or it certainly wasn't happening in a way that like comports with HIPAA, where every young person would have like a private place to speak to a mental health professional. And we know that substance abuse groups were not taking place. And these young people, many of them had been there since July. And so to expect, young people to feel anything that resembles like calm, when they're not having any access to regular, meaningful mental health treatment, or groups being run by mental health professionals, feels like that's where our priorities should lie, not on forcing family members to take off their shoes and like strip down their clothing. But yeah, I'll pass it to you, Commissioner Canales.
You're on mute, Commissioner Canales.
Okay, thank you so much. This is the first that I'm hearing that family members are getting stripped naked. I had not heard that, but if this is happening, it is concerning, because I know even in prison, they can't just strip you naked. And if you agree to a strip search, there's forms to be filled out and everything. So I'm wondering if there's forms that are being made available that we might look into, as to how many visitors per weekend they are stripping naked, and what is the reason why, and are these family members consenting to it? Because that is concerning, because prison law office even got involved when they were starting to try to do that in the adult prison system. The extra security that's being ramped up, I totally agree that this is not the solution. I knew it was coming, though, when everybody started demanding we keep drugs out of the facility. More searches, more scanners, more guards, more. To me, seemed totally contradictory to the model that we're trying to create. But that is why I keep advocating for more programs beyond what we have right now. We know the two big ones. They're going to get in there, no problem. They're going to take formerly incarcerated youth in there. But for some of the youth, that's just not working, and it's just not enough. And too many youth are still just sitting around doing nothing. That's why I continue to advocate. There is so many community-based organizations, as Sabre just called in, as the gentleman Major just called in, so many community-based organizations doing things. They're also formerly incarcerated, and they're letting the youth be creative and productive, and maybe think in a different way, or utilize their talents in a different way, because not everything works for everyone. But probation seems to have this locked door on everything and everyone, except for, just like, oh, okay, we got this in there, so now we're good to go. No, and I feel we need to keep pushing. maybe meet with the probation director, maybe with a few directors, and get in the room together and ask, what is the clearance process here? Why are some getting cleared with no problem? Why are these smaller organizations having a problem? Because they have a lot to offer and a lot to give, and the youth are begging for it. That's why I said in my first comment, we are doing a disservice to the youth if we are not expanding and pushing for more programming from smaller community-based organizations. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other hands. Is there anyone else who would like to comment? Go ahead, Commissioner Terry.
Just wanted to add to what Commissioner Canales is saying. If we could also see what's the backlog right now of programs who are trying to get in, how many are actually on hold? Because I do feel like people report this at several meetings that they've been trying to get in, and you're right, it's a black box. No one knows what happens and what the process is. And then I think to speak to what the last caller was just saying about families, I think it speaks to the larger issue of like, how are we viewing families? Are we seeing them as part of the problem, which is why it's easy to dehumanize families during visits or to shut off youth from being able to have a visit or make a phone call. I think it's like the other part of the model. It's the healing with the youth and all of that, but it's also, how is the department engaging families, and are they being meaningfully engaged? Because I think when families are viewed as a partner versus something peripheral, then I think it results in that kind of treatment, or youth not getting their calls or visits. So.
Go ahead, Commissioner Garcia.
Thanks. So I didn't want to sort of respond to every person who says something, because then that means you'd be hearing from me half the time or from us half the time. But yeah, I'd also like to jump in with a few things. So, okay, so programming. When you go and you start thinking about the number of hours in a day, so you got your weekdays. They have something like 6 hours of school. Getting them to and from school takes a certain amount of time. Getting them to and from lunch, these things take way longer than I would have expected. Right. My baseline is Jordan High School and Watts. Right. That's both for like sort of behavior expectations, how loving I expect staff to be and caring, but also things like, I'm used to like, you give kids 6 minutes to go someplace and they get there, and then you spend another 10 minutes getting the scragglers. That's not the way it works here, right? These are much longer times, much more, everybody's got a plan who's going to go when. So that takes a long time. And then after school, you've only got so many hours outside of dinner and downtime. And so we usually have our programmings all run at the same time, right after school. And it's also the only time often that, at least, in the camps, that youth have a chance to go play basketball with the other folks. So the choice is, do you want to spend some time, you know, with what you're used to on the outside, playing basketball with a bunch of other folks, or do you want to go and do more like school looking like programs? And a lot of them don't want to do that. So one of the things is, if we just try and keep forcing more and more community-based organization programming in the same block of time between when school gets out and dinner, we're actually not increasing the programming that kids experience. So this is why I was so focused on educational program from when we first started doing these visits, because that's the largest chunk of time. Um, and so, if we're really going to be talking about bringing in community-based organizations, it's a conversation that's got to include LACO, and we have to be talking about how do we bring in these other organizations to work during the school day and not just afterwards. To this day, the best program I've seen was I don't know, 2.5 years ago. It was a theater program, a drama program that was brought in that took place during LACO class time, and it was amazing. And so yeah, we definitely need more programs, but we also need to be thinking about um, the calendar in more collaborative ways with LACO. And then weekends, right? You've got family visits, and you don't want to run programs during family visits. So there's not actually a lot of time in the calendar for programming. So that has to be addressed. About Page and Appleby, I didn't do the official inspections this year. They definitely have more challenges than, say, I think the staff at Kilpatrick or Rocky or even Scott and Kirby. But I've also learned to watch what staff do and not just listen to what they say. So staff will, yeah, they all the time they tell me to, oh, you've taken away all of our tools. Oh, these kids, they're just bad coming from the halls now because the halls have fallen apart. And a year ago it was, and we're scared because they're bringing in weapons, although I haven't heard a lot of that this year. But when you really push on that, uh, a lot of those arguments kind of fall apart. Um, right? Like they don't need pepper spray in the camps. And a lot of the staff will be very proud of the fact that they've got other ways of heading problems off before they happen. But a lot of these staff who say things that alienate me, that make me feel like they are actually not people who are really caring and nurturing with youth. Those same people, when I watch them interact with the kids, actually will not behave the way you would expect them to based on what they say. Um, so, a lot of them have sort of, they're talking points that they recite to us, and they're frustrating for outsiders to hear because I think they often sound like unjustified complaints and an attitude that's not nurturing. But a lot of those same people are really great with the youth. But I'm talking about, like I said, my unofficial visits at Page and Afflebaugh or my past visits and the other camps for sure. But at Los Padrinos, they just don't have the chance to be that way. It's not like that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I do hear the concerns about Page and Afflebaugh. And like I said, we got a long ways to go before these are national models. But even with these concerns, again, and my benchmark is Jordan High School in Watts, which is, not the greatest institution in America. But there are places where kids come out better than they came in. And then also for recidivism, right? Sometimes these things take some time. If a kid does 4 or 6 months in camp, right, we can't expect that to just completely transform what a youth is like in other environments. But that isn't in itself a statement that it was a failure. And searches. So I have a story I wanted to tell about that, which is it was at Los Padrinos, and there was a elderly woman, senior citizen, dog sniff said she smelled like drugs. Now, I don't know, maybe she was, I don't know. My read of the situation was she lives with people who get high, maybe somebody in the car, the dog smelled something. And she was turned away. And she was like, please, can't you just search me? And if she could take her shoes off in order to have seen her grandchild, she would have done that in a second. She wasn't even given that option. She was told, no, dog bark, you're out. We're strictly following the rules, no exceptions. And she was asking for a real search and didn't get it and was asked to leave. At the same time, I also hear that there's a certain dignity interest in ensuring that there are rules and that they are followed, right? That visitors see staff going through the same checks that the visitors go through, the family go through. That's actually not even so much about safety as about dignity. And I think that's been behind a lot of the comments we hear about, accusations that like, staff accusing parents of bringing the drugs in, and young people and their families accusing the staff of bringing the drugs in, and CBO saying there's no way it was us who bring the drugs in, right? I think the truth is we don't know exactly who is always bringing the drugs in. And it's probably more a combination of these things. And so really, I think what's going on is it's about respect and dignity, and that's it. Hasn't been talked about in our meetings or in most of my conversations. But that interest needs to be looked out for. Um, and at the same time, we can't lose sight of the fact that uh, there appears to be a much less fentanyl in our institutions than there was 6 months or a year ago. And that is just a fundamentally important goal. And that progress is the result of these increased searches for all of their negative consequences and inconsistencies. Okay, that's what I have to say about all these points so far. Thank you.
Chair Kakani, Joseph has raised his hand again. Joseph, is there something else that you wanted to say? You can speak now.
Just reflecting on some of the comments around programming, just my observation. Currently, the program, like some of the programming, right, is just kind of filling in the gaps. And what I mean by that, like I've heard from some of the youth that when I'm doing programming, they share sometimes probation just comes and gives sign-in sheets, so they have something to turn in. Um, Unfortunately, there's been time where I go in for programming with my team, and because they're at school or they're at programming, we've sat in the unit, without youth, just kind of waiting for them to come back, and that's not like on the youth of the unit, for me, that's kind of like on the people scheduling this, like sometimes we've shown up to units and the unit doesn't even know that we were coming. Um, and it's been happening quite often, also another concern of mine is the voice of the youth isn't heard. Like, we probably take some, and I mean, I'm not involved in every meeting, but I am involved in engaging with these youth that are sitting in there. I mean, I am involved with these youth that have been sitting in there fighting fitnesses for a couple years. Like, how long does it take to fight a fitness? And then like they wonder why they're hostile, they're irritated, they're not getting answers. They're like, they're in the dark about like their life, their livelihood, and then like probation wonder why they're on edge. It's like these kids don't even know when they're going home. Like I go to Silmar and these kids don't even know their release date. Like when I was in prison, at least I knew what day I was going home if my behavior was good. That was all contingent. None of these kids know what day they're going home. The ones that are doing like long lengths of time, and I think that's a big part of that stressor, that extra weight that's carried in there, because these youth are in the dark about their livelihood. They don't know who's coming. They don't know, if the program's gonna show up. Like we brought food and they were like, "Oh, you guys weren't lying," and that just told me that they're lied to all the time. On top of before they came to the halls, their life was lied to now, but yeah, like the programming could use a lot more teamwork with probation and providers, but what it looks like right now is just probation is just trying to fill in the gaps and not communicating across the board. I think there was a comment around doing programming around the same time, every day. I think that's more practical. 10 a.m. there's group, 1 a.m. like 1 p.m. like something like that. But we still got work to do. But yeah, I'll keep going and going because there's a lot of concerns I have around just the programming aspect. But yeah.
Joseph, can I ask you just to clarify really quickly? Commissioner Canales, I think thought that you had mentioned that there were some strip searches happening. I did not hear that. Can you clarify whether that's what you said or not? Sorry, Janae, can you unmute Joseph again, please?
Yeah, I was kind of, I said nothing about naked. I said
Okay,
shoes and socks off. I don't know
Okay.
where naked came from.
okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Commissioner Canales. That worried me so much that I had missed that comment.
Well, it worried me too. He did use the term cough and squat, or did I just imagine that too? And when you cough and squat, you are naked. So I was shocked to hear that they were treating visitors like that.
Okay, I think he's clarifying that that's not what he was
Okay.
not saying. I also wanted to say, in response to something Joseph said, that we have a report coming out from the Probation Oversight Commission very soon that will address some of the issues that were brought up about the long stays in juvenile hall. It's also something that Major commented on earlier regarding the importance of that time. So please be looking forward to a report on that, and also a written report and a town hall coming up. Go ahead, Lupita. Actually, don't go ahead yet because we need to unmute you. Give me 1 second. And you may need to unmute yourself. Okay, now you can go ahead.
And I'm with the Returning Home Project. And one thing I really want to say before I give my own opinion is that I work with a young person. This young person I feel like he's the oldest young person I've ran into inside Selmar Juvenile Hall. His concerns has been that there is no real programming for young people. He appreciates the people that come in and talk to them. He appreciates the little bit of schooling that they have, that it's not scheduled, that the college comes as they please. But what he sells and calls people are professional idiots. He would like to see for himself and his other peers around him to actually have trades in there. How can young people, this is him saying, how can young people actually have real um tools for them to exist back in the world, right? Whether if it's construction, whether if it's computer engineering, whether what business, right? Like whatever it is, that they need to re-enter to the society. um and that's something that I always carried in my mind, especially because this young man, it seems so bright. And I've asked him, why aren't you part of the youth council? There is no youth council. It is fake. There, and also it's a concerning, if you speak out, how would you get targeted as well? Right? So how can we reassure that we center young people and not try to look at other plans? Yeah, and I just really wanted to say that.
Thank you, Lupita. Any other comments? Okay, with that, I actually will Chair Kakani, I'm sure, is going to say something about this as well, but at our next POC meeting, we're going to address a lot of the issues that have come up today. So I really hope all of you will attend. And with that, we'll go into our conclusion.
Yeah, I don't have any closing remarks except thank you to all of you who joined us today, who shared your voices with us, your concerns with us. So much gratitude to the commissioners for spending their time in these facilities. So much gratitude for the POC staff for synthesizing all of our comments, and trust that there were lots and lots of comments and notes that needed to be synthesized and streamlined and I don't know, put together in a way, again, that was like accessible and made sense. So yeah, just so much gratitude for the folks who are here today. And obviously this work is far from being done. And my hope is that, we get to a place where we are caring for our young people in a way that allows them to lead healthy, successful, and fulfilling lives that are not overburdened with trauma and harm. And fingers crossed we get there. Let's go 2024. And I think with that, just a reminder that our next commission meeting is on Thursday, January 11th at St. Anne's Events and Conference Center at 9 a.m. You can find registration details on the Probation Oversight Commission's website at poc.lacounty.gov/meetings. Thank you again, everyone, for listening in. Have a great night and hope to see you next Thursday, in person or virtually. And it is a jam-packed meeting, so get ready. Thank you.
Good night.